Check, check. Oh, look at this. Karaoke has begun. All right. Welcome. So it's great to be here this morning. After a year of not assembling together, it's nice to be in person and enjoy this day of networking, a day of leadership development, a day of just fellowship. So encourage everybody to not sit right next to the folks you always sit by at work. Get out and meet people. It's going to be a great day. So I knew I couldn't run this clicker. So here we go. So now we've got a commentary from the front row up here, and so we're gonna need you all to go out and come back with a better attitude. There we go. I want to thank our sponsors. Without the sponsors, we really wouldn't be able to put this event on. So every year we get great support from not only the private sector, from the agencies like City of Phoenix, City of Mesa, Glendale, Tempe. So it's a great event, and so thank you sponsors for stepping up again and helping us out. Before I get started, I wanted to extend a sincere thank you for the exceptional effort that the planning committee put in. And so the planning committee, it's a tough job, planning an event like this, trying to work through all the logistics with the venue and the food and then the last minute things that come up are definitely can try patience at times. So the planning committee, if you would stand up, I'd like to acknowledge you. I see Quaylen back there, Kayla. Thank you for your effort. And then also the board of directors, thank you for your great work that you've put into this organization. And so the board members that are in here, if you would stand and be recognized at this time. Awesome. So those that don't know me, my name's Travis Cutright. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Mesa. I'm the President of the Central Arizona chapter of NFBPA, and I'm also a national board member. So again, welcome. Chris, can you run this for me? There we go. Just some reminders today. If you can make sure your cell phones are on silent during the sessions, use the official app, WOVA, to enhance your experience. Make sure you tag your photos in social media, especially the ones of me, if you got some good ones. Now, if the bad ones, don't tag those. And here are the hashtags here. And so we're going to get going because we've got a full day of activities. But before we go too far, I want to take a moment to recognize a couple of people at this time. When we do our seminars, we've got the Marks of Excellence Awards and then we've got a President's Award. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Chris Brady and Mr. John Pombier to come forward at this time, if you would. Thank you. So when I started at the City of Mesa 5.5 years ago, and Chris didn't have any gray hair at that time, one of the first conversations that I had with Chris and John, literally one of the first meetings, was that I would appreciate their support of NFBPA and it would be nice if Mesa would become an organizational member of NFBPA, and there was no hesitation. So Mesa at that time became a Gold Association member of NFBPA. We've had Chris and John both have spoken at numerous events and they've just been unbelievably supportive of what we do in Mesa. And as a commitment to diversity and furthering that within the organization, we've created the Mesa Hispanic Network and other affinity groups, which are as well represented today. And so they've just been a driver behind this and a support of me and this organization. And so I wanted to present you both President Awards. And so I want to do something unique.
Not yet. Sorry.
Yeah. So I want to do something unique. And these two gentlemen, if you work with them, they've got distinctly different personalities and interest in that. And no, it's not a roast. So Mr. Pombier's President's Award, the awards are uniquely distinct.
Okay, now I get it.
So John, thank you for your support. And then Chris is a connoisseur of, Chris spent a lot of time in Texas, and so he's a connoisseur of barbecue and that sort of thing. And so I thought that, getting him some tools for his craft.
I can't use those. They're too nice.
Thank you. Would be nice. So we wanted to present you with these awards. Yeah, for sure. And John, give me a call when you.
This goes with the barbecue. Does Travis have to be in it? Or?
I don't know.
I have to show what I got. Don't post this one. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no. Awesome. So at this time, I will get out of the way and ask Valerie to come up and introduce our morning panel, and we can get into the meat of the program. So Valerie Churchwell.
Thank you. Thanks, Travis. And actually, let me do one thing. I'll find my way on top of these boxes. Gentlemen. See my look, I trip over them. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm really here, like really. Hey, it has been an absolute minute since we have been together and an absolute pleasure to be back with you. So give me some grace. This is the first time back. I'm feeling a little, getting back on my feet here. But we're here this morning to talk about Journey to the Top. And so hopefully everybody's here to learn a little bit of something from our amazing panel that we have over here. Government and public service has changed substantially in the past decade, and so have the demands of public sector leaders. However, the mission of the public sector, in many ways, remains timeless. Everyone wants their area, be it city, county, or state, to be the best place where everybody wants to live and work. Our session this morning will highlight a distinguished panel, these gentlemen over here, as we talk, who will share lessons learned from their journey to becoming city managers. One thing to keep in mind as we experience this conversation, and this will be a conversation, is that leadership takes place in all levels of an organization, all day, every day, and not just in the C-suite. In other words, public sector leadership is diverse across multiple dimensions, and every one of you in this room, and I mean every one of you in this room, has an opportunity to realize your place within the organization. So my name is Valerie Churchwell. I think that's on the next slide, which I walked away from. Let's see, this is the technology. Got me, thank you. And I'm the Senior Policy Advisor to Mayor Kate Gallego with the City of Phoenix. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you today, and we have an amazing panel with us this morning. I know that all their bios are in the apps, but what I want to share with you is I'll take a little time, a little snippet. Actually, I'm going to stop walking so I can read, to you about what they're doing. So, and guys, when I call you, if you would come up, we're going to start with Jeff. So Jeff is the city manager for the City of Phoenix. Jeff moved to Arizona in 1999. You said first chair or second chair. In 1999, where he joined the city as a city auditor. That experience propelled him In his more than 2-decade-long career with the City of Phoenix, including roles as Budget and Research Director, Deputy City Manager, Assistant City Manager, and as October of 2021, the City Manager for the City of Phoenix. I know he's gonna kill me later. As part of the city's executive leadership team, he has overseen a wide variety of city departments, including police, fire, community and economic development, as well as Phoenix Public Library and Youth and Education Office. Jeff holds a bachelor's degree in political science from Morehouse College and a master's of public administration from Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania. All right, next up we have Chris. All right, Chris is the city manager for the City of Mesa. He served in his role since 2006. He is responsible for approximately 4,000 employees and an annual operating and capital budget of $1.8 billion. Mesa is the nation's 35th largest and home to largest city and 500,000 residents. With more than 30 years of public sector management experience, Chris served as the assistant city manager for the city of San Antonio for 10 years. That's where the barbecue came from. Yeah. He's got to give us some of those Texas tips. He also served in various executive management and administrative positions for Bel Air, Texas, Houston, Texas, and Provo, Utah. Chris earned both his Bachelor of Science in Political Science and Master's of Public Administration degrees from Brigham Young University. All right. And Andrew, you're up next. Andrew Chin is the city manager for the City of Tempe. There we go. He became the city manager in April of 2013, started his career in 1992 as a volunteer in the Tempe City Attorney's Office, and then became a law clerk in 1993. He served as a contract attorney from 95 to 96. He briefly left the city, briefly left the city to work in Mesa, and then returned to Tempe as an assistant city attorney from 98 to 2004. Senior assistant city manager, or city attorney until 2005, when he left the city for private sector. So we're gonna ask him a question about that. And he returned to serve as the city attorney in 2006 till January, when he got his newest role. And then he holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona and earned his law degree from Arizona State University. Thank you for being here this morning. And Mr. Phelps, last but not least, we appreciate you coming this morning. We were talking he was giving me his coffee to get me warm.
I guess.
And we're spoiled here in Arizona. He's the city manager for the city of Glendale. Was appointed to his role in November of 2015 after serving as the Deputy Pierce County Executive, the highest ranking appointed official in Pierce County, Washington. With a storied career in the state of Washington before he arrived in Arizona, Kevin was a deputy auditor for the Washington State Auditor's Office and served for 7 years as a council member of the city of Tacoma. Before serving in government, Kevin had more than 30 years of experience in the private sector as a businessman, which included being the founder and managing partner of the Landmark Convention Center in Tacoma. So we're going to talk to him a little bit more about that. Thank you. All right, so I've asked the panel, each of the panel members, to provide you with opening remarks to ground us and familiarize you with their background and their experience, and how their expertise has led them to their current roles. So following these initial comments from them, they have 5 to 7 minutes apiece, then we're going to have some pre-scripted questions that we'll ask of them, and then we'll have the opportunity to turn it over to you all as an audience. So does this work for everybody? Okay, I know it's early. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to move up here and,
We moved.
I moved. I was in the corner. All right, so with that said, I guess the guys rule. We're gonna start with Jeff. And Jeff, would you share your story?
Sure. So being the rookie here, my story probably isn't as deep as the rest of my counterparts here. And I also want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be on the stage with so many accomplished managers. And it's also a pleasure to see Travis wearing a black and gold pin on his lapel. I have to say I love that. But honestly, my story may be a little bit different than most, and I think the thing that grounds me most of all is the way I grew up. So I grew up in public housing projects in Philly, Pennsylvania. Um, I was raised by my grandmother. My father was in prison, and my grandfather was murdered. So that's the background behind me and what makes me tick first and foremost. The other thing I would say is I'm a father of 3 and a husband. And so my career started with the city 23 years ago as an internal auditor. When I first came into the city, we all come in after you get your MPA, you have these delusions of grandeur about being city manager. And so I had those. I worked my way.
Somebody say yes.
I had those delusions. I worked in the city auditor department. I started as an auditor 1. I progressed fairly rapidly in audit. Within 6 months, I was an auditor 2. 6 months after that, I became a senior auditor. Audit, for me, it satisfied a lot of my natural inquisitiveness and the way my mind works. I like to fix problems. I like to troubleshoot, and I like to ask why a lot. And that may explain why I left audit and went to budget. So when I left audit, audit's always after the fact. Money's already been spent, the nasty deed's already been done. And so for me, I wanted to see the front side of that. Before the money is spent, before people make the mistake that I'm there to clean up. Plus, I got tired of being hid in a dark corner, because they don't like seeing us come. But when I got to budget and research, I found that also satisfied a lot of the way my mind works, because it wasn't just about the numbers and ticking and tying them out. Audit's black and white for the most part with shades of gray. Budget is all gray. There is no black and white. You are the box. You make the box. And so I spent, 6 years or so as a management assistant 2 in the budget and research department. And I'll just say that, I worked there with Ginger Spencer, who's probably like one of my best friends in the whole world and like my sister. We were on the same team in budget and research. And it's funny because we all, at that time, we still had these delusions. And we said, one day we're going to run the city of Phoenix. We're going to be city manager and assistant city manager. And so you talk about self-manifesting prophecies. Ginger is now on my team as deputy city manager. So again, things work out the way they're supposed to. So in my career as deputy budget and research director, I was always the public safety guy. So I always had public safety. That was my acumen. People always went to me for fixing and troubleshooting public safety issues. Early in my career as deputy budget and research director, I was given an opportunity to be budget director. I turned it down twice. I turned it down the first time because my kids were too young and I didn't think that I was ready for it. So I was able to look at myself and be honest that I didn't think I had developed enough of the foundation that I needed to be successful. The second time, I didn't feel that I was going to be a compatible match for the, at the time, city manager. I thought I was going to have trouble reporting to someone. So I again, chose to defer that decision. Then Ed becomes city manager, and he comes downstairs one day and he says, I know you said no twice before, but would you be interested in being budget and research director? And I had a great relationship with Ed, and I think the world of Ed, and I know Ed's a man of integrity. And so I told him yes. And so for 5 years, I was budget and research director. I think he and I got to do a lot of creative things with the city. We got to fix a lot of the wrongs that were done in the past. And in that time, I was able to build a very solid foundation with the mayor and council. I'm not afraid to say no. Everybody that knows me knows that. It takes a lot to scare me, and I think that's also because of the way I grew up. So I'm always going to do the right thing for Phoenix. I'm not going to do what's right for me or what's right for a person at a point in time. I'm thinking long term. I don't want people to have to relive the sins that we're living because somebody made irrational decisions. And so then in 2020, Ed asked me to come downstairs as deputy city manager. That was February, right before COVID hit. We had a surplus. I thought life was great. COVID hits, surplus becomes a deficit. So I had to model all these different scenarios for the council and get them there. But at the same time, I wasn't able to fill my old position as budget and research director. So I served as budget and research director and deputy city manager for almost a year. So running the budget department during the first stages of COVID, and also then having departments report to me. So that was fun. It was a lot of fun. But what I did in that time is, again, I further developed my relationship with council. And you know, they got more and more comfortable with me. And so then a year from there, not even quite a year, February of 21, Ed comes knocking on the door again, and he says, I'm gonna name you assistant city manager. I'm like, what? You've got 5 other deputies that have been here a lot longer than me. I'm not sure I'm the guy. He was like, that's why you're the guy, because you don't want it and you don't think you're the right person, but you have all the intangibles that everybody looks for in a manager. I was okay, I did that. And so then, you know, a couple months later, October, so like 8 months later, I'm in California at a soccer event with my son, 7 in the morning. I get a call from Ed. He's like, I know your son's in the finals and you're getting ready to watch a game, but I want to retire. I was like, okay, I knew that was coming eventually. When are you trying to retire? October. I was like, okay. And he says, well, I only want to do this if I know you're willing to take the role, at least while the council does a search. And I said, I'll do it for that, but I don't want your job. So those delusions ended. I said, I have no desire to be city manager. Once you get up close to it, you see, and these guys will tell you, it's a lot. It's a lot. And you have a session later that talks about mental health, and that's going to be an important conversation. As well as those that gift that John Pombier got. But the reality is, you know, I told him I'd be willing to do it as interim. And the council was trying to figure out what they were going to do, what their national recruitment process was going to look like. And, you know, I had one-off conversations with them. They all came to me and asked me why I didn't want to be city manager and whether I was going to apply. And, you know, I was pretty adamant, no, don't want it, I'm not applying. And so they were moving on their path to do their national recruitment. And then Ed comes into the office again one day. He says, put your jacket on and come with me. I'm like, oh. So I go into e-session with the council, and I sit down. They're like, well, you know, we've been in here for 2 hours talking about the recruitment process for city manager. And we kept coming back to, no matter who we bring into this role, the person that's going to be doing the work is you. And they're like, it's not fair for you to do all the work and somebody else take the glory. And I said, well, if you want to call it glory, I don't know that I call it glory. But in any event, you know, they just said, you know, our council is never unified. They're like, you've got a 9-0 in support of you being city manager if you're willing to take it. So it kind of put me on the spot. And usually I don't have a problem saying no. But this time it was hard because you saw the mutual respect that I had for them and that they had for me. And so it happened right there on the spot, you know, no recruitment process. They felt they had the right person. And here I am 5 months into the job as city manager, so.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, Chris. You're up. Yeah, you're up.
Very good. Yeah, I don't have that story. So I'm ready to say amen and go home. That was, yeah, I can tell we're in a church. Those back rows filled up very quickly. There's nobody in the front row, so. Yeah, my path is probably, I don't know, say more traditional of typical city managers across the country, but maybe a little bit more like that in the sense that I've had to travel. In order for me to promote, to move up in the career, I've had to move, right? I've had to go to a different community. So when I first began, I worked for the city of Houston, Texas. I worked right out of grad school. I had the opportunity to get a job, entry-level job into their budget. They called it their finance department. So that was a good place for me coming out of grad school, just to really kind of get my hands on the nuts and bolts of city management and what happens. And so just like most of our cities probably, you know, I was assigned a variety of different departments and had an opportunity to engage with departments as I reviewed, monitored budgets, did reports. But it was interesting at that time, in Houston, they have an interesting structure of their government. The mayor, of course, is elected at large, but they also have, and maybe it's more like, I guess where Scottsdale kind of is, they had a city treasurer, city controller is what they called it. And the controller was also elected, but had a very limited role, but was over kind of controlling the treasury, right? And so each month, the council, because back then Houston was having a lot of challenges financially, and there was always questions about what the status of the finances were. So every month, the mayor had to give a presentation to the council, kind of a status of what was happening financially with the city. And then the controller would come in and essentially say, well, you don't believe the mayor doesn't know what, in this case, it was a she's doing, even though she was a, she was a CPA herself. But anyway, there's always this kind of natural political conflict simply about reporting on the financial status of the city. It was this big political moment each week that we went through. I learned about this, right? And so one of the things, the advantages I had that I learned quickly in a big city like Phoenix, but Houston's really very, very large, was, if you really want to be involved, is you find out what's most important to your organization and figure out a way to contribute. So I was just coming out of grad school. I had learned in grad school, some latest technologies on being able to do statistics and do reports, and specifically about making presentations that had a lot of included a lot of graphs and illustrations. And so I was able to use that and help out with the report, and the mayor was thrilled because now our report was so much better than the controller's report. Don't worry about the numbers. It was all about the presentation, right? And so anyway, so that was my introduction to local government. It was not as much, well, the facts were important, but how you communicated what your message was and how you could present that in a way that was understandable and that, you could make your point, right? You could use that to persuade others to look in the policy direction that the mayor wanted. And so as an entry-level budget analyst, I became that person that the mayor needed and had to, say, I want to show this graph, because I was the only one coming out of grad school who knew how to use that technology. And so, because the rest of them were career, employees. They'd been in those positions for probably more than a decade. And they were used to kind of doing their own spreadsheets and everything. Anyway, but my point was, it was an opportunity for me to really get engaged and using those skills and my interest in just showing, hey, you can do it this way. And anyway, so it helped. So I was in Houston for a while, got that experience, which was very beneficial because I'd have to go sit outside the mayor's office before she was going to the council to present. I didn't get to sit in her office when they were reviewing my report, but if there was a question, then they'd come get me and I'd have to go explain it to them. Because I was still just entry level, so anyway. But after that, I had the opportunity, much like what you're doing today, when some of the individuals I was working with belonged to a networking group in the Houston area. So it included a lot of the big departments from Houston, but also some of the other smaller communities. And from there, I got to meet some of the staff members for a small community called Bel Air, Texas. Now, Bel Air, Texas, if you think about Houston, I think it's like 600 and some square miles, right? It's huge. But Bel Air is a city that's literally an enclave city inside the city. It's totally surrounded by the city of Houston. But I got to meet some of the staff from there. And as a result of just that networking, when a position came up in Bel Air as an assistant city manager, again, I'm only 2-3 years out of graduate school, but it's a fairly small community, somewhat affluent because it's kind of this enclave, kind of in a very nice part of Houston next to a medical center and downtown. So the people that live there could afford pretty high priced homes. Anyway, from that networking, I was able to get a job as an assistant city manager. I know the title sounds big, but it was still pretty small community of about 30,000. But early on in my career, what that benefit was for me, I had to learn how to be a supervisor, right? And what was interesting in that part of my career was being a supervisor for department directors that had a lot more experience than I did, right? I mean, I was, 20-something years old, and they're middle of their careers, maybe closer to the end of their careers. And here comes somebody who probably could have been their child, frankly, right? Was going to be their boss. And I was very fortunate that almost all of those directors and my relationship and my kind of respecting, I think, where they were coming from and trying to, again, show them how could I help them, created almost a mentoring relationship where they were my mentor, even though they were reporting to me. Does that make sense? And so they would take the time to kind of explain things, which I really appreciated, because it wasn't, you could imagine the response could have been completely different, right? So I learned from the public works director. He spent a lot of time explaining to me the operations and what I needed to know. So anyway, in that job responsibility, I kind of picked up another skill set, maybe, of learning to work with individuals, the relationships, how important they were, being a supervisor. And then about 6 years or so into my time, the city manager left. When you're in a small community, there's not like a big bench, it's you, right? And so the council had to go through a decision-making process. They weren't getting along with each other. They couldn't decide. They'd bring in candidates for city manager. They'd come and go, and they couldn't ever decide on it. So for 1.5 years, I was the acting city manager. Now, part of that was my own doing. The council asked, are you interested in the job? And this is where it probably wasn't really a good idea, but I told them no. and what I guess it's kind of like, Jeff, and the reason was, mine was a little different because it was a small community. It was great. I was learning a lot, but professionally, it wasn't where I wanted to ultimately be, right? I wanted to go back into a larger community and have some experiences. And I was very much involved in the state, local city manager kind of conversation. I realized there were bigger cities and opportunities. So anyway, I told them I wasn't going to apply for the job. But for 1.5 years, I stayed as the acting city manager. They literally didn't get a city manager until after I left. I really do think they did that on purpose so they could pay me as an assistant city manager, do the city manager's job. Anyway, so I left from there, and then I had the great opportunity to go to work for the city of San Antonio. And went in the city manager's office, and that was interesting because coming from a city of 30,000 to a city like San Antonio, which was like 1.2 million, had a health department, had all these departments that I'd never even heard of or even thought of, airports and things like that. Well, the city manager said, listen, you know how to do all these other things. We're going to give you the things you've never had experience in, which kind of scared me because I thought he's just trying to, watch me fail. But it really pushed me, again, learning about health departments, airports, and a lot of those kind of programs. And while I had great experiences in San Antonio, the city manager there felt it was very important to rotate the assistant city managers and give them different departmental assignments every couple years or so. So by my time that I was there, before I left, I had the opportunity to supervise almost every department, except for maybe some of the internal service departments. So when I left, I was responsible for the public safety departments and everything. So, and then Cheryl Scully showed up.
I'm sorry.
Comment. So Cheryl took over about the same time I left. And so it was a right time for me because it gave me, I had had such great experiences, again, there's some significant projects, getting your hands on things, great relationship with the council and the community, but I wanted to be a city manager. By that time I was like, okay, this is kind of what I thought about in graduate school, but now having had the experience, that was my commitment. So I started the recruitment process, going around looking at jobs, opportunities, and that was revealing too, right? Because I learned a lot about different councils and interviewing with councils, different communities, started learning about, okay, is this the right community for me? Because there was some jobs where the headhunter they'd come to you, please apply, I would apply, going through the process, going, I really don't want this job. And then you're in the finals, you're like, oh my goodness, what do I do? So my wife didn't want to move to that community, so anyway, but then I had the opportunity to come to Mesa, Arizona. And it's been a great blessing for me. I had 16 years as a city manager, right? And so And that really goes to the credit of the community and the political stability of the community. You don't read a lot of, in the papers, or hear a lot about any turmoil politically in Mesa. So it really goes to the longevity of a city manager. And as Mesa, when I first got there, someone asked me, what do you think of Mesa? What is your impression of Mesa? And I was brutally honest with them. I said, it feels like a big suburban neighborhood association. And that's all you're trying to do, is just take care of what's internal, right? You're just focused on internal. I said, you're the 34th, 35th largest city in the country. Does anybody know that? They didn't. They kind of did. People used to always talk about what it was like, back in the 80s. So anyway, it's been a great run, a great experience. Lots of things happening in Mesa. Got great talent. They're all here today. We've built a great team, and that's, at the end of the day, I probably think that I learned the most through my journey as a city manager is, it's not about me, it's about the team, right? It's we always talk about, it's getting the right people on the bus and everybody moving forward. So that's my story. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. And I think we have Team Tempe out here in the audience, if I'm right. I'm like,
Yeah.
with that, we'll hear from you, Mr. Andrew.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. So I'll not unlike Jeff, I'll rewind back to my family a little bit to kind of set the stage as to maybe how I got to where I am today. My parents met at the University of Arizona in Tucson. They got married in 1961. My father was born in Shanghai, China. My mom was originally from New Orleans. And I knew a little bit as I was a kid about how they met and got married. I know that they got married in New Mexico, even though they met in Arizona. It wasn't until later that I found out that the reason for that was that interracial marriage in Arizona was illegal until the law was changed in 1963. So, give you a little perspective, that wasn't all that long ago. And my father was at the time going to law school. He had studied to be a geologist at the University of Arizona. He went to law school, graduated in 1965. And his practice was around issues involving civil rights and justice. And I think his experience as an immigrant into the United States and as a person of color, I think really sort of shaped him and why he had certain focuses when he was an attorney just starting out. And it certainly was a huge influence on my life. I eventually myself went to law school, as you heard from my biography. And I was deeply influenced by the idea of how can our institutions of government make positive change in the lives of not just the people who work in government, but also the communities that we serve. So that was something that I always thought about. He advocated, most specifically on the rights of people who were immigrants and not necessarily citizens into the United States, and people who had no voice. I think, again, like I said, his own personal experience shaped that quite a bit and had a profound impact on me. So as you could tell from my biography, my career track starting out was in law. I graduated undergrad from the U of A. I went to ASU Law School, graduated there in 1994, and I had every intent to remain as an attorney throughout my career. I was very fortunate early on to get a position in the City of Tempe Attorney's Office. I got to meet a lot of really experienced and very kind and generous attorneys who took me under their wing and really mentored me. I know that's going to be coming up a little bit, but I'll give you a sneak preview as to what my answer will be, which is the mentorship of others is something that is invaluable. To have people early in your career, or really at any stage in your career, take an active interest in you and your success, and to kind of foster that early on meant the world to me. And it really opened up a lot of opportunities for me as I went on. Because what they did was they put me right in the middle of lots and lots of things. Things that probably were a little bit even past where I maybe should have been, but it was nice because they were there to backstop and to really sort of watch my growth and to take an active interest in my growth. So I continued, as was mentioned, I got to work for the great city of Mesa for a couple of years, leaving Tempe, worked there in their prosecutor's office, which was great. I mean, every day I was in court, trying cases, working, and one of the things you learn, especially as a city prosecutor, is that the job of in the criminal justice system for prosecution isn't about convicting people. What it's about is justice. That was drilled into my head. And some of the greatest successes that I can think of in that role wasn't because we prosecuted or convicted someone. It was often the opportunity to make the decision not to pursue charges, to understand that there are other extenuating circumstances, to take the time to listen to people, most of whom were unrepresented because this was at a city level. So these were not felonies. Many of them were just people who had made mistakes or had misfortunes in their lives. So to take the time to listen to that and make decisions predicated on justice and not on wins and losses was something that I really thought about. And again, it goes back to a lot of how I was raised by my parents. So left Mesa for opportunity to come back to the city of Tempe when my mentor, who had been the city attorney for 33 years, retired. Worked there again for many years. Left to work at a law firm that specialized in representing all of the small cities and towns in Arizona in their land use. They were all in the Arizona Municipal Risk Retention Pool. So they would come to our firm and whenever they were sued over zoning cases and things like that. So did that for about a year until I had the opportunity to come back and serve as city attorney for 7 years. And then in February of 2013, we had a transition. City manager was terminated. They were looking for stability. They asked me to step in as an interim. I said, sure, as an interim, but you're going to do a process, right? And they did. They conducted a process, and after going through the process for a couple months, they said, we really like what you're doing. Would you have any interest in the permanent position? And it was a real crossroads for me because I truly enjoyed being an attorney, and the law was always my calling. But I thought, when is this opportunity ever going to arise again? A unanimous council was asking me to serve at the highest level of this organization, an organization that I grew up in and that I cared very much about as someone who had been a resident of the city of Tempe since I was 5 years old. So the opportunity came along. I said, when am I going to challenge myself like this? I'll do it, foolishly perhaps. But 9+ years later, and I'm still in that position. And still, the thing that motivates me every day is the opportunity to serve. We serve communities. We serve people, all walks of lives, all races, all genders, all socioeconomic statuses. And that's a privilege. And it's something I take very deeply and personally to say, I get to live in a community, I get to serve a community, and I get to be part of doing positive things on behalf of this community. So it means a lot. And I was glad that my Tempe contingent is here today because several of them represent something that we've done recently here in the city of Tempe that I'm very proud of, which is create the first of its kind Black Employee Resource Group, the TBEA. So congratulations to them for starting it. Started that in June of 2020, and it's been growing strong ever since. And it's a demonstration that from the beginning of your tenure in these positions to throughout, there are always going to be opportunities to do better and to push beyond what we thought was possible to better things. So thank you so much for allowing me to be here to speak today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for all the great work that you're doing. Do you have interim in your title?
Pardon me?
Interim. We have
interim. He's never been an interim.
I know. We don't have an interim over here.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invite to come here this morning. And I think what you'll hear here is all of our journeys of how we got here were different. Our paths were different, which I hope is encouraging because each of you all have your own unique path. And so there's not one way, if you desire to get into a leadership position, there's not one way to do it. I'll start with my kind of background. You're probably all familiar with the term military brat. Well, I was a Boeing brat. My dad worked for a Boeing company, born in the Midwest, was transferred down to New Orleans when I was just right out of elementary school, and then moved to the Seattle area where I spent then the next 50 years in the Seattle area. I went to school at Washington State University and studied journalism and communications. Got to my senior year and woke up and said, I don't want to do this for a career. And it just never dawned on me that it was a line of work that I wanted to do. I always had an inkling to want to be in business. And so much to the chagrin of my parents, I left the school literally a few hours away from graduating and got into the private sector really quickly. Opened my first business up in 1978 at the age of, would have been 23 years old at that time. Now for all you youngsters, there was these things called video recorders that came out in 1978. And so I actually opened up the very first chain of retail stores in the Northwest that focused just on video recorders. And to kind of give you a perspective, the cheapest model back in 1978 for a video recorder was $1,098, and the top of the line was $1,500. And so I was kind of on the very forefront of technology there. Then I started a retail store that combined not only the video, but with audio and with computers. I was starting to see kind of that blending. And for the next 30 years, I worked for myself. It's probably the only reason why I haven't been fired to date is that most of my career I was the one making that decision. In 91, I moved to Tacoma. I was living in Seattle, loved the Seattle area. Tacoma was kind of this gritty town that didn't have a great reputation. And I bought a property down there and redeveloped it into the state's largest privately owned convention center. And what got me into kind of government was one day I was contemplating my business. We had put literally millions of dollars of renovating this unique structure. And I asked myself the question, what would this building be worth and this business be worth if we're in downtown Seattle versus downtown Tacoma? And because it would be worth a lot more in Seattle. And I decided it was because people valued Seattle more than they valued Tacoma. And what that did, it really forced me to rethink how I wanted to grow my business. Now, I'll tell you right off the bat, I was not a science guy. That wasn't my forte. But I remember the term of kind of osmosis. And that's where you have a membrane, and the way the membrane grows is you bring things from outside through the membrane, and that's how you replicate and get better. So it dawned on me that while I can pay attention to my business, if I wasn't paying attention to what was going on around me, because that's what was determining really my value, the things, if there was high crime or homelessness or bad infrastructure, that would affect me. And so that got me active in the community. A number of years later, I realized I didn't have any friends in Tacoma because I decided to run for public office and nobody tried to talk me out of it. And I spent the next 8 years on the Tacoma City Council. And what I learned there was I really wasn't very good at public policy. It really didn't, it wasn't something I was really passionate about, but I was fascinated with how government worked and just the inner workings of it. And now I look back, my poor city manager, I must have been the worst city council person ever, and I think I know I'll be paying a pittance for years on that. But I got out, and then woke up in 2007. A business mentor of mine had said that entrepreneurs have to be careful because they're really good at starting something and growing something to a certain spot, but they're not always the best person to take it to the next level. And in 2006, we had really had a record year, and I felt that I had taken this company as far as it could go with my skill set. And so I decided to sell the company, and I sold it in early 2000 or late 2007, right before the crash. And so I was very fortunate there. My wife wasn't very thrilled with the idea of me hanging around the house all day long, and so she said that I need not think about retiring, that I should look at myself as being temporarily unemployed. And so then at the same time, a friend that I knew quite well was the state auditor. The state of Washington had just started a huge performance audit division through a sales tax levied statewide. And they were struggling because the auditing, they were good at compliance auditing and accountability audits, but they were really struggling on performance. And so he asked me to come in and kind of be the deputy state auditor over performance audit. When I took the job, I said to him, you know, this is a great opportunity, love to do it, but I want to tell you there was one job out there I think I would love to do in government. It would be being the chief appointed official for Pierce County. And so I asked Brian, my boss, I said, if I ever get that opportunity, can I leave here and we'll still be, our relationship be intact? None of us ever thought that would happen, but 2.5 years later, a new county executive came in. By their charter, they can appoint one chief appointed official, and that was myself. And so that got me then kind of running Pierce County, just a county of about 850,000 people. We had about 3,500 employees. Started in 2009. During the absolute downturn of the economy, especially in the Northwest. In fact, my first 5 years of running the county, it took us to the 6th year to get back to where revenues were the year before I took over the company. So it was a real challenge to do that. Eventually, I had family here in this area, decided it was time to kind of maybe get out of the rain, and I was just fortunate enough to be appointed as a city manager here in Glendale, and so it's been again a different journey for me. What I would say is this: I mean, I think a similar theme is that when I ask myself, how did I get here? All I can tell you is that I was fortunate enough to have people that poured their life into me, even though I didn't deserve it. And so that notion of then of being a mentor is really important. And the one thing I think I've been successful at is relationships. And I think relationships don't happen automatically. I believe relationships have to be cultivated. You have to be deliberate about it. And that's the one part that I don't let my friends go too far without me reaching out and connecting, because that's what has been my success. My wife has music on all the day. I'll leave with this. One of the songs she likes to listen is a country song, even though she's not a gigantic country fan, and it's called Always Be Humble and Kind. And there's a verse at the very end that says that when you get to where you're going, make sure to turn around and help the person behind you. And so that's kind of, as I kind of age out in my career, that's what I'm hoping to be able to do, is to reach around and help those, because I would not have been here had it not been for that same type of philosophy.
Make sure to reach back. Okay, now it's question time. Let's start with Jeff. Okay. In this age of budget restraint and constraints, public sector organizations often need to make do, finding new ways to deliver results. You helped lead the city of Phoenix through the economic downturn, and to be able to do this meant you had to be creative and agile, build relationships with stakeholders differently, embrace new technologies and digital transformation, and with the ambiguity of the pandemic, we all know what that looked like, you had to ask the challenging questions and not look for easy answers. With all of this going on, what have you done to remain grounded when expectations of leadership are shifting, almost right before our very eyes?
It's a good question. I think you heard a lot of it in these comments that we've all made already, and that is, you have to surround yourself with people that are going to be honest with you. And you don't want a bunch of yes people around you. You need people that are going to tell you when you're messing up, when you're getting too full of yourself, and all of those things. But we also have to remember, our jobs are hard. Your jobs are hard. We have 9 different bosses, I have 9 different bosses. We're all different, but I've got 9 different bosses, and that can be challenging. They have 9 different personalities. That's probably on 1 hour of the day, and they got a couple others throughout the rest. But the challenge that I always have to remind myself of, it's hard to report to 9 different people, but they're reporting to 1.7 million people. They were elected, most of them, by about 200,000, 250,000 each, that have 250,000 different requests, different views. So when they're coming at me with a bunch of crazy things, I have to remind myself, a lot of times it's not them. A lot of times it's them trying to respond to the people that they were elected by. And so I have to kind of remind myself and ground myself with thinking, okay, at the end of the day, like Andrew said, we're here to serve. If I wanted fame, fortune, and glory, I wouldn't have been in public service. I got into public service because I want to help people, and I want to lead an organization that provides for an entire community, and that's what I'm doing. And so that's how I ground myself.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, move over here. Let's do Andrew. Okay, so we know about your in and out from the city. You started as a volunteer for the city of Tempe in the attorney's office and continue to rise through the ranks of the organization. Even though you've left and come back a few times, you've called Tempe home for the last 30 years. When you started, did you know that the city of Tempe would be your employer for almost 25 years? And again, that's a bit unusual to see that type of longevity in this day and age. And then the second part of it, and you touched on it earlier, is what networks, peer-to-peer, coaching, mentoring, provided you the most benefit during your career? And then do you still utilize them today?
Sure. No, I thank you for the question. I can't say that I did know, 25 or 30 years. Actually, it'll be 30 years this summer since I actually started volunteering for the city of Tempe after my first year in law school at ASU. So I got to update my biography. I've miscalculated on the actual years. But no, I mean, it's as someone who's still in school looking for experience, as soon as I graduated and passed the bar, you're looking for jobs, in your field. And, I knew I liked the municipal work. And the reason I liked it was because I got to work with all these different departments, giving legal advice and really kind of touching upon almost every area of the law. So every day was a challenge. You get a call from a client department and you have to respond, and you never really knew what their next issue was going to be. So that was challenging, and looking for challenges and being willing to stretch outside of your comfort zone, I think is part of what really sort of always motivated me, and probably I think for a lot of you to continue to want to kind of build your careers. So no, I didn't, I went to work in Mesa. I loved working for Mesa. Actually, it was one of the really important decisions that I made early on to move out and to get other experiences. So my ability to kind of come back to Tempe had a lot to do with the fact that you kind of build, your career over time, working in different places, hopefully being successful and creating enough of a reputation wherever you work to kind of justify why you might want to come back. Now, all the while, like I said, I was continuing to live in Tempe. I had deep roots in the community, but I never could say, if you asked, 1992 me where 2022 me would be, I think they'd be shocked. Especially the leap from being a city attorney to city manager. I tell people who said, well, why would you do that? And what's it like? I said, well, we're all at the same table being asked questions by the same client. City attorney is appointed by council, just like city manager. But the question changes slightly, right? City attorneys are often asked, can we do something legally? City managers are oftentimes asked, should we? Counseling the council on sort of matters of policy and sort of the nuances of balancing the political and the administrative. That was something that I really enjoyed honing that skill, and it was something that was truly a challenge. And so, did I know? No, the answer is no. But how do you get there? It's you build your reputation, you make relationships, that last. Many of the people that I work with in Mesa are still very close friends of mine. The people I worked with in private practice, I still keep very much in touch with. And the people who took an active interest in me in Tempe are people who I have continued to build a relationship with, and I have deep gratitude for anybody who takes the time. So whether or not you're day one or you've been working wherever you are for 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it might be, look for people in organizations who who you trust, who you believe in, who can help kind of guide you, whether formally or informally along the way. I think building those networks is critical. So.
You still have connections with many of those people today?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that they still take my call, sure. I mean, I mean, so it's funny. I say that jokingly, but my old boss is a resident of Tempe, so from time to time I'll hear from folks about, hey, why is this happening? Or the relationship changes and matures. Now it's not so much that they're guiding my career, but they're more asking me questions about things that are happening, and we still have those interactions. So. And I have the opportunity with working with people coming up in the organization through, like ASU's Marvin Andrews Fellowship program with the MPA students and other type of programs to continue to kind of understand that it's not about you, it's about continuing the success of any organization and building, kind of into the future for people who can step up and, and building that bench. So that's really a lot of my focus today, understanding, I'm not at the beginning of my career, hopefully not at the end of my career quite yet, but there's still opportunities to continue to pass that on and to kind of work and be a good mentor and a role model for folks in the organization as well.
Thank you for that. All right. Kevin. Okay, the public sector recognizes the benefits of technology, and you already talked about the video recorder stuff that you jumped in the beginning. But from our side of the fence, we're often slow to adapt or adopt new due to restricted budgets, and often find ourselves playing catch up in this area. So to move ahead, leaders must be clear about what technology can do for an organization. You are a city manager that serves with an emphasis on leveraging technology and innovation. So the question to you is, how has integrating technology into your career been great for you?
Well, it's a great question, and I think all of us up here, I highly respect. I think government gets sometimes sold a little bit short about the innovation, but I would say the first thing I would try to do is set a culture of innovation. And so there's a couple things that kind of stood out in my career. When I was an elected official in Tacoma, they decided to do a rollout of, really get rid of almost every software package that was there and do an SAP integration that did everything from utilities, integration billing, to human resources, to everything. And they tried to get this gigantic thing put in place, and it was not a very successful implementation because there was huge resistance within the workforce to adopt it, and because they'd always done their practices one way, and that became a real log jam. And so one, I would say you have to make sure you get buy-in on the use of technology and innovation. Now, some of you who are maybe more my generation remember when there used to be Lotus 1, 2, 3, long before there was Microsoft Excel. And I remember going to Microsoft Excel, and it was like almost had a riot because these people had used Lotus 1, 2, 3 their entire life. The second thing that kind of reminded me when I got to Pierce County is we were still working in a mainframe environment. And the reason why is the current organizational structure had the director of budget and finance overseeing IT. And there were some nexus to that because typically we built a lot of IT systems to support more of the accounting side of the operation. But we had a veteran budget and finance director, and Pat was the first to say he didn't like technology. So he was comfortable staying in a mainframe environment, even though really kind of SQL servers were really the way to go. And then I think the third thing that jumped out is when I had my company, and we were investing a lot of money into the physical structure because it was an older building, but I decided to make a leap in terms of a software to really run all of our sales, marketing, and accounting. And boy, this was back in about 93. I invested about $100,000, which was a huge bite for me to invest that much in technology. But what I learned was over the course of the next several years, we increased our revenue and business by about 5-fold and didn't have to add anybody into our accounting and budget and finance department because the technology was a way to gain additional capacity. So I think what I focus on is making sure that as we look at innovation, we don't do it just for the sake of innovating. We need to be able to collectively have a reason for doing it. And then we have to be ready that occasionally we're going to have failure as you innovate. My oldest son had early careers with Amazon and Microsoft, and I can tell you from following his journey that they have all kinds of initiatives that fail continually. But it doesn't stop them from continuing to innovate. Unfortunately, in government, when I came from the private sector into government, what I learned was that in the private sector, careers are generally made by successes. In government, careers are ruined by failures. And so there almost gets to be a resistance to taking on risk. And so I think as a leader, what we have to be able to hopefully communicate to our team is we're going to lean into innovation, we're going to use it smartly, and if we have some failures, that's okay. We're going to still get back on the bike and ride it after we've fallen off of it. And that then means that as a city manager, that I have to be able to be willing to be the one to take responsibility with the council. I joke I've got one skill set is I think I know how to jump in front of the bus. And that's really what my job is. It's not to push somebody else in the organization in front of it. If it goes bad, then I have to own that. But I want to empower the people that are innovating and working really hard to implement new innovation, that they know that we're not looking for perfection, we're looking just to daily get better at what we do.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. You have been the city manager in your role for the longest, over a decade. So the demands of public sector leaders have changed substantially over the past year and over the past 10 years. And looking ahead, it's been suggested that public sector employees will need to change their capabilities. The next generation of leaders will need a new mindset to thrive in the future of government and public services. That said, what capabilities and/or mindset should today's leaders be developing for their future?
Great, thank you. So I think that's a great question. And I think we always think that there's something new out there that we have to know for the next generation, right? But I would suggest to you that I think we just repackage things a lot of times. So in Mesa, we've started talking about what it means to be smart and what it means to be healthy. Okay, so being smart, most of us are probably pretty smart because you've gone and received the intelligence, the education, the skills to do your job, right? Every organization, you have to be smart. You wouldn't exist. But we spend a lot of time on being smart. We, take classes, we do accreditations, we review the technical side, the business side of what we do, the intelligence side. And that's very important. But almost every organization is going to be smart, or they just literally wouldn't function, right? But it's still important. But being smart is kind of given. What's really hard, and I think this is especially true now, coming out of the pandemic, and as we kind of assess what successful organizations are, it's being healthy. What does healthy mean? I'm not talking about your wellness program. I'm talking about your emotional state of your organization. And how do you communicate? How do you connect with those you work with? How do you interact in your settings as humans, right? And respecting each other and really working to try to find ways to understand the diversity and the strength of each person's background and who they are. And we talk about, that's what we don't spend a lot of time on in organizations, right? Is really focusing on the be healthy part. Because we think, oh, that's the soft stuff. We're here to get a job done and do our work and put your nose down and work on that, memo or that spreadsheet or that report or whatever it is. And that's true. But just think how much more the advantage you can if you have a healthy organization where everybody understands the intentional purpose of your organization. And that communication is up and down in the organization. Everybody's talking about it and listening to what it takes to make it happen. And we also understand the emotional part of what people need and how that we can, as an organization, how can we help them to be successful? Because as is mentioned here, we all come from very different backgrounds, which is our strength, but it's as a given, it's something we all have to work at so that we can, in our own minds, figure out how to make that work in the organization. So it's a lot of communication, it's a lot of clarity, it's a lot of putting together the recognition of how important is that emotional connection and engagement in our organizations that everybody feels like they're part of accomplishing the purpose. That's, to me, what we all have to work on. That'll be the success of our organization. It's not just being smart, which we're all going to work on, but it's going to be how are we going to be healthy? Once we figure that out, that's why I've kind of realized is like, listen, I need to spend more time on helping my organization prioritize that, right? And you're doing that today, right? Is becoming a healthier person and taking that back to be a healthy organization because you're going to appreciate the soft skills, the important personal networking skills to be successful.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, so Bauer Technology is telling me we've got 6 minutes. So now's the time we get to ask questions from the audience. So I don't know if a couple of you all have questions you want to ask real quick. I know there's a couple mics back there.
There's one way back.
I see one hand.
comes.
Come on down.
Oh, she's looking at her phone. It's a pre-prepared
It's a
question.
pre-prepared question.
Uh-oh.
It's an emotional intelligence question.
Oh, very awesome.
There
Okay.
you go.
There you go.
All right, so this pandemic has really tested and tried all of our leaders, I mean, more than before. So in what ways do you control your emotions when experiencing triggers such as anger, frustration, or just plain uncertainty to achieve positive outcomes? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody?
So I'm like, can you I guess I understand the question is how we can control or how the organization or?
You
Okay,
personally.
yeah.
Personally.
Oh. That's a great question. And I think it's important to recognize we can go through all those emotions, right? But there's time and place about how we express it in the organization. I mean, we're all going to get angry at some point. We're all going to get upset. We're all going to go through we're working with other humans, so it's just going to happen. I think what I've learned early in my career is sometimes I probably allowed that to take over my decision making. Maybe it tainted it too much, and now I've learned that it's okay to have those feelings, but I also figure out how do I turn that into a way to communicate to make it productive. And that's hard because it's kind of like this internal battle in your head, right? So how far do I push this and being angry or upset? And I think it's a maturity of looking around your environment and figuring out how do I use that emotion to really accomplish the better good. And I avoid focusing on who I am and what's important to just me. I can be angry, but why am I angry? Is it because of my pride? Well, then I probably need to swallow hard and think of another way to deal with that emotion. So I don't know, that's kind of my approach to it.
No, I agree. I had an incident early in my career when the hot-headed side of Jeff came out, and many of my Phoenix people probably remember this. I was budget director, and
Wow, it's an epic moment, huh?
oh yeah, this was a good one. So I was budget director. We were in the middle of budget adoption process, and our council did something that, in my opinion, was extremely reckless. They voted down the budget. And they vote down the budget in a time when you can't change it. The state adoption process is very prescriptive. And, I'm in my head, I'm like, well, we put all this work in, we did all this work, we produced a great budget, and here I've got 9 people that are being reckless and that are, throwing the community up for grabs because we would lose state shared revenue, all kinds of other things. So in the middle of the council meeting on TV, I closed up my binder, got up and walked out and said they could have the job.
I heard you closed it up with a little enthusiasm.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of enthusiasm.
I've heard this story.
Yeah. And so I proceeded to walk back, and city manager kind of runs after me. He's like, can you come back to the table at least? I go back to the table. We get through the meeting, then I go back to my office, and then Milton Dehoney, the assistant city manager at the time, he comes to my office and he's like, are you all right? I'm like, oh, I'm good. I can get another job. I'm not, at the time for me, I was more focused on, if you're gonna burn the house down, I'm not gonna be at the table when you do it. You're gonna own that yourself. But what I didn't think about is, I didn't protect my boss. I left him hanging, and I should have never done that, especially with the loyalty that I have. I should have never put him in that position and exposed him. So that was a wake-up call for me that, Jeff, you're a little hot-headed, which I already knew, but I had to check that. And so, you got to find outlets. You've got to find ways to not take things personal, because a lot of times they're not directed at you personally. It's the seat that we occupy. It's the position that we occupy. The other thing is a lot of things that happen in council chambers, it's theatrics. They don't even feel that way. When you talk to them one-on-one, during their meetings and during your briefings, completely different people. When they're on that stage, mic'd up and on TV, it's a show. And you have to remember that.
Thank you.
Amen.
So if y'all had ever heard that story, he told you it's
We've heard it in Mesa. We talked about it in Mesa, yeah.
urban legend.
Heard about it too.
Ah.
Good theatrics.
All right, so I know I am getting the hook from the back, but I want to get, got a finger? I got one
Oh,
minute?
I figured.
We have one question from our
I got
virtual
one question.
audience. Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. One question from our virtual audience member, Evelyn McNeil. She wants to know, how do you all as city managers set the tone of reaching communities that may not normally engage?
So you set the tone for communities that may not normally engage.
Well, for me, I made a point, again, because I grew up in a community that didn't engage and didn't receive services. So I told the council and all throughout my career, I wanted to engage folks that were either considered hostile or that just didn't really engage with us at all. So Kayla can attest to this. When I was in budget and research, we got one of our affinity groups that, I don't know that I'd call them an affinity group because they're kind of radical, that come to our council meetings and berate us all the time. But I would bring them into budget and research monthly. And I would sit and have conversations with them and educate them about the budget and educate them about all these things. And in that process, I built a relationship with them. Now, it's not going to change their behavior, but at least there was a respect that was established. And so I think a lot of times as organizations as large as us, we're too busy putting out fires that we don't have the time, or we don't think we have the time and capacity to actually go and engage the community. And our jobs become 10,000 times easier if you engage the community, engage the people that you're working with. It just makes life so much easier.
See a lot of head nods on that. Anybody else on the panel?
I'll just say that in Tempe, we've spent the last 2 or 3 years sort of making a conscious effort to try to increase the equity component of our outreach. You know, we all do public outreach to a certain extent, great and small, and we were concerned in Tempe that, are we checking a box to say that we did public outreach? Or are we actually reaching into communities that may not have historically had the kind of voice that they should about decisions that directly affect them? So this equity in action work that we've been doing is really geared at exactly what the question was about, I think, which is, you know, not just saying that we do outreach and solicit public opinion about decisions that council will be making, but really kind of going deeper and finding out, are we truly reaching the communities that are affected? You know, so much of things like environmental justice and other things that you hear about in terms of inequities and provision of service, I think comes back to, as Jeff alluded to, are we truly, you know, making the effort to engage communities that traditionally don't get engaged in public process, especially at the local level? So that's something that we've really committed ourselves to in Tempe, and we're beginning to implement that right now.
All right. Now I see doors open. Travis is standing here. I think this is the end of it. So we heard earlier, and Kevin talked about the song Humble and Kind, Tim McGraw. It's not a country song, it's a human song. If you get a chance, listen to it. It speaks volumes about the conversations that we've had with these gentlemen. So with that being the case, I'd like to say again, thank you to each of you for joining us this morning. Please take time to talk to them and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Valerie. Nice to meet you.
Can I get some, there we go. There we go. Thank you, Valerie and the panel. You guys were awesome. Did you guys enjoy that? Another round of applause. All right, our breakout sessions are about to begin. So